So this is the first time I've done this. Well, I did a couple videos about a year ago, and I called it The Sovereign Voice. And they were just talks about things that I'm feeling, things I'm seeing, and a sense of us all coming together, feeling things together. Today, I want to talk about the idea of the landscape of being fragile. And the reason I want to talk about it is because being tender, being fragile, is being strong. We've been brought up to believe that if you're vulnerable, if you're like the delicate flower growing in the sidewalk, that you'll be crushed because you have nothing to protect you. You have to build walls around it. But what happens when the walls drop away? When the floods inside begin to knock away every little structure that you've placed around yourself to hold yourself up as a role or a personality in society. There's a feeling right now that all is falling apart. And the reason for this is that it has to, because we've been in denial of the fact that, history is straight ahead, like the idea of life from birth to death. And in fact, it's much more expansive than that. And what's happening right now is that the moment in a day, a minute, is so incredibly expansive that it knocks all structures that we've placed together in our lives as meaningless. Meaning is coming from a different language now. It's coming from the soul. And as you can tell, the word soul is something that's probably belonging to maybe academia or psychologist or literature or even art. And that's bracketed out of culture or politics or economics. And what I'm trying to do is reintroduce a language that is your soul language, but a language that you use to the self, not necessarily to empower yourself, but to give yourself a sense of purpose. I guess maybe it would be easier to talk about it if we were to go back like 2,000 years to a time where our relationship with nature was more prevalent and more mystical and also more meaningful. And we were in equality to that. So our language wasn't superior. And superiority, power, a certain type of power, has given us a sense of lack, really. And that's going to go back to what I'm talking about, which is when you are tender, when you are fragile, when you are grieving, when you have experienced some sort of loss or some sort of hopelessness in your life, there's a landscape that you travel that's not on the day-to-day living space. I would like to call it a descent that you have to take. And some people choose that purposefully. A lot of artists do, a lot of poets. But some of us don't have that choice. And I wouldn't say it's a great thing to choose that journey. But what I am going to say is the shadow, the descent that we all must take to become who we are includes walking through darkness. And walking through darkness is basically an unknown land, an invisible land, a landscape that comes from the imagination. And as you know, imagination is often mocked, but it's the one thing you fall into when you feel a sense of hopelessness. We return to books, music, film. All of these things are necessary for us to navigate a landscape that we've removed ourselves from. Our story is something that is very fragile and is very special, and it's not published in newspapers, although every once in a while we see these amazing stories, and it's great because you see so many people sharing incredible stories right now because there's a need in humanity to reveal how incredible we are, and that we're really, right now, more than ever, unified by our grief. And I know that's a big statement because in saying that, I'm presuming that everybody's unhappy right now, or everybody's had loss. But I really believe that there is a huge population of people right now that have lost people. And with that, you could say the world's always been like that. There's been wars and things, but for some reason right now, there's something very unique about it. And maybe because the internet's there, we're closer and closer together than we ever have been. But it's brought us closer together to reveal things to us that we wanted to know, maybe we didn't want to know. I see it as the human stories are fantastic and great. The news, on the other hand, is a giant distraction from that tenderness and humanity that's bringing us together again. But when that emergence comes together again, it's going to create what feels like an explosion. It's like when you have an epiphany, or in its opposite, when an illusion shatters in your life, something you believed in you realize isn't real. Something breaks open. We say breaks apart. But actually, in a moment, light is able to get in where there was darkness. And the darkness inside ourselves wants to have some light. And there's a yin and yang to all of what's inside us. So it's holding both in equal balance, none this way and none this way. And that, in the middle, is where the fragile sits, where that tender sits, where the blindfolded goddess that holds justice sits. This is not easy to speak of because it doesn't serve a dogma or an institution or an idea. It just simply is. But how you get to tenderness is by forgiveness and letting go. I think right now, these punctures in our lives are coming from something that's very, very ancient. I think that many generations inside ourselves are asking to speak. And their stories that we're not told are like in a rush to speak through us. And so holding that space, holding that divinity is something that is very holy. And it wipes away the banality, the ignorance, and stupidity about things that are pointless, really. I'm probably not being very specific right now, but I think what I'm hoping is that everything I'm saying is talking around the subject of being in a world that is inhabiting the fragile right now. Whether we call it that or not, it is, because it is holding that space, that tiny little flame that was smothered. And if we don't reopen that space and look very clearly into what it's like to hold, I have one here somewhere. Well, I had a feather anyway, but to hold something like that in your hand is something. How do you hold something and not crush it? They say if you hold something very, very small, you can see where you are in your life. How you hold it, how you cherish it, how you gather it, how you effectively give affection to it. Because actually that metaphor is yourself, and from yourself is into others. And we say, who are we to know? Who are we to know of these things? But actually, I believe there's a beautiful language emerging out of a very wounded part of ourselves. And I guess I just want to participate in talking about that aspect and seeing what people think. That's all I'm going to say for right now, because I don't even know if a lot of this has made sense, but this is just a test.